Thanks so much, Lauren. And welcome everybody who is here. Since it's 10 o'clock, I kind of want to dig in and get started if that works for everyone. So I'm going to warn you ahead of time. This is not going to be a sit and get. This is not a session that is designed for you to all be here to listen. What I really want to do today is to give us all an opportunity to play in the sandbox and spend the next hour thinking about data. And so just want everybody to kind of be prepared for what we are going to jump into together. And we are going to use a tool called Padlet to kind of walk us through what we are doing today and to also capture all the work that we are doing today. So I'm going to paste the link to the Padlet in the chat in just a second. And you're welcome to open it whenever you want. And we will get started. See some familiar faces in here, so that's fun. Okay, so I will start out by introducing myself. My name is Katie Zaback, and I am a consultant. I have a company called Zaback Solutions, and what I specialize in is helping allow data to be messy and helping turn data into action. So helping leaders take all the great data that we have out there and turn it into action and go through the process of continuously looking at data and thinking about data from a continuous improvement standpoint. As part of the reason I have been connected with this work is that I have been serving as a consultant with ESG as part of the REACH initiative to try to make sure that the way that we're collecting data is easy for our partners, but also that we are creating meaningful iterations in the way that we look at data. So all of the various different partners can learn from the work. So I was really excited when Ayala asked me to be part of this convening and to lead a conversation about how we turn data into action and how we increase our practice of data use. And so that's what today is designed to do. I have been very heavily influenced by this idea of disfluency, which is, it comes from Charles Duhigg's book, Stronger, Faster, Better, that talks about the fact that data, in order to be truly influenced by data, you have to get your hands dirty with it. You actually have to work with it. Oftentimes things like dashboards only work if people have some kind of strong connection to the data. And so that's what this conversation is designed to allow us to do, is to connect to data. And it's going to be simple data. It's not going to be complex data. It's just going to be designed to help walk you through that process. So we have a lot of participants today, and I do want us to be able to do some introductions. But what I'm going to ask you to do is do those introductions in the chat. And so if you've looked at the Padlet, you know that what I want to see is what's your name, your position, and what is your biggest barrier to using data. So I'll shut up for a few minutes, give you all a chance to type that in and put it in the chat. And then I'm going to ask a couple of you to share out on those biggest barriers. So again, we're looking for your name, what your position is, and the biggest barriers to using data. Okay, so I'm seeing some themes coming through here in our barriers. Lack of access, helping people understand the full picture. Knowing which data you can access. Access is a big one. Accuracy I'm seeing in here. Ease of understanding. That's a good one. All right. So anyone want to talk a little bit and share with the group about your biggest barrier?
This is Pete Lindstrom from Community College of Denver, and I put on there the access to timely, relevant data that's easy to use. And I think we've grown leaps and bounds in terms of our ability to access a lot of data here at the Community College of Denver, as well as the community college system, but we still need more advanced sort of analytic tools or dashboards that allow for that kind of ease of use and commonly held dashboards that we will be using that everyone has access to. So it's not someone with specialized skills who has to pull the data, make it readable, and then distribute the data, because that just creates such a huge labor intense it's a hard part on us in terms of labor, time, and then how to get it out to people so that way it can be actionable when they need it.
That's great. Thanks so much for sharing, Peter. I think that connection, like transparency across the institution, letting everybody have access to that sounds really important. What's some other challenges that you focus or that you run into with data?
Katie, I would agree with that statement and take that a step further. I think one of the challenges that I often see is people not fully maybe recognizing what the question or the challenge is and cherry picking a piece of data and not having that combined with all the relevant data to make sound decisions. We tend to glean little pieces of information and not full information and make judgments and assessments based off of partial data that doesn't include the big picture.
That's really helpful, Brian. So I'm curious, is there something that you've seen that helps people see more of the big picture in your experience?
Well, I must admit, on a lot of my big data projects, I want to be able to have the discussion. So to Peter's point, it may be difficult to put on a dashboard. I tend, as a business officer, I tend not to make data pretty. I use it for myself primarily, so that may be a part of my limitation. But yet, when you provide a mass amount of data, I would rather be able to present it as a conversation rather than to provide the spreadsheet, just to make sure that people are on the same page and understanding exactly what they're looking at.
Yeah, that conversation is really important. Great. What other challenges do folks run into when it comes to using data? Okay, so one of the things that I think can sometimes stop us is wanting perfect access to data. And what I've noticed is that there is a lot of data out there, or what I know is that there is a lot of data out there that can answer a lot of questions, but a lot of times it's a lack of understanding around what's out there, or because it's not the perfect data, then folks are reticent to use what is available to us. And one of the things I want to challenge us today is to think about how we use what is out there and allow that to, and then build on what is out there. So the first thing I want to do is talk about what are some of the critical questions. I want to spend this time to give everyone a chance to brainstorm. What are some of the critical questions that we run into when we are talking about adult students? So we are gonna, and I'm gonna pull up the Padlet tool for this. What I want to do is I've got a series of different kinds of data questions around adult students. And I want you to take a couple of minutes to think about when you're focusing on adult students, what are the kinds of questions that you have here? And I'll kind of walk you through how you can add it and how you can interact with each other on this tool. So let me pull it up. Okay, so for this Padlet, what you can do is you'll see that there are different streams and everybody should be able to access it. You do not have to create a sign in. It might make you feel like you do, but you should just be able to go to here. Is anyone having a trouble accessing the tool? Okay. I don't see any show of hands, but definitely put a comment in there if anyone's having trouble. And then the next thing that you can do is, I already see people adding, so you can use the plus to add what your critical question is. And you can also, actually let me give you the option. I want to give you the option to vote these up so that we can see if people like. So if you like something, you can vote it up. There you go. There's lots of good stuff coming in here. Okay, the next thing that I want to do is use some collective knowledge within the group to understand, to read through and look at, are there people who have been able to tackle some of these critical questions within your own context, who have experience that they would like to share with the other participants here. So take a few minutes to kind of read through the comments, jot down if there's something that you have tackled and how you went about that. Anyone have an example that they want to share based on the critical questions that they see here? So I've got a few ideas, because some of this is, some of these questions are very answerable questions out there. And there's a number that we could pick off of these and find data resources that are available. So for example, educational attainment is something that there's a lot of data resources around. So I'm looking at this question about what is the demographic and breakdowns based on educational attainment. So how many of you have heard of the Stronger Nation report that the Lumina Foundation puts out? It is an annual report on educational attainment. And the good news is about that report is it offers that educational attainment, not just at the demographic level, but it also offers educational attainment at the regional level and all of that data. And so it's a really easy publicly available report that you can access to get that information. I also see a theme in a number of these about information that you need to get directly from students. So the first bucket of data I see is data that's available out here in reports that are available. There's also this bucket of data that is directly from students. And so the publicly reported data is going to be your most accessible data. The student feedback data is going to be the hardest data to get from a centralized standpoint. That's the kind of thing that your institution is probably going to have to act on, whether that is through a series of surveys, or I know that many of you, IELA and the adult initiative through the system has already agreed to do some surveys. And so that is data that's going to be highly localized. It's going to be data that's much more difficult to get to. And then there's this middle set of data, which is the data that probably lives in your IR offices. And one of the biggest questions, one of the biggest challenges, I think, within the system, and we saw it in your barriers, is that we're always looking for this perfect set of data from our IR offices. And as a result, oftentimes our IR offices get overwhelmed with so many data questions. So the next thing that I would really like to do is split up into some groups and look at just some simple data points around enrollment by race, ethnicity, and age, and completions by race, ethnicity, and age. And what I would like each group to do is I've got a data set for each group. And what I would like each set to do is think about these critical questions. Think about the questions that you have about enrollment and or completions, and do one of 3 different types of analysis. The first is you could construct a understanding of like a population profile. So you could pick Hispanic adult students and understand what is the population profile or a series of profiles. The second kind of analysis that your group might dig into is what are the type, or what are the maybe a comparative analysis. So how are Hispanic students different from white students, or how are older students different from your traditional students? And then the third type of project that your group might choose to work on is you might look at this data, figure out what additional questions you have, and then construct what your data request would be for your IR office. So thinking about what, given the information that I have here, what might I go back to my IR office to look like? And the goal of this is to get everybody kind of thinking about data, looking at a simple data set, and then coming back together to share what we found from such a simple data set, and to share kind of what their learnings were and what their next solutions might be. So I'm gonna put everybody into 3 groups, and then I will put these questions into the chat, and I will give each group a data set to work on. So let me stop sharing. Here's our 3 questions. And you can actually access these from the Padlet as well. Does anyone have any questions? We'll go ahead and so there's the drive with each of them. You'll be added to a breakout group, and then you can you should look at the file that's associated with your drive. And we'll go ahead and spend some time together kind of working through an analysis or choosing a question. What are you going to explore? Looking at the data, exploring it. You can, click through these files. And I'll give you just kind of a quick view of what the files look like.
Okay, what are the differences of these 3 files on here?
They're all the same.
Okay.
So each group will be kind of, sorry. Yeah, so they're very simple. So it's just going to be, and these are very publicly available data, or they're not publicly available, but they're consistent with what would be publicly available. We have created some additional breakouts here that you're not going to see in other places. And the system office actually has this data available for all of your institutions as well. So once you look at this larger data set and think about this from the system level, you might want to take a similar kind of approach looking at your local data and then digging into the local data. So the first tab here just has the enrollments. These are the enrollments over each semester by whether or not students are first-time students, non-first-time students, whether or not they are, what their race ethnicity makeup is, and their age breakup is. And then the second piece is the types of credentials that these students are completing. So this again has the age breakouts, the race ethnicity breakouts, and then the type of student that they're, or the types of credentials the students have been awarded over these periods of time. So I might want to see, you know, are Hispanic, like what credentials are Hispanic students most likely to pursue? And then I might look at a layer deeper around like, what are the characteristics of my Hispanic students that at my institution? And using just these two data points, you can actually glean a lot of understanding. So that's kind of what I want you all to get the opportunity to do, is to spend a little bit of time working through data. As you're doing it, think about like what surprises you, what you want to know now, or what you want to know in the future, and what you might dig into. So let's go ahead and put folks in a breakout. Maybe. I might not have the ability to do that. Where's my host?
Yeah,
Well,
I'm here. I made you a co-host. Is it not going to give you that option?
it does not look like it.
All right. Well, I'm not super familiar with breakout rooms, but I can give it a try. Let's see. How many breakout rooms did you want? 3?
3. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you everyone for your patience. So it says assign automatically and include co-host when assigning. Would you like to be included?
Don't include me.
Okay.
I will
Awesome.
come visit folks though, as
Sounds
you're kind of
good.
talking through this.
All right. So I think we've got them. And then I'm just going to hit open all rooms. Does that sound right?
Yep, that sounds great.
Awesome. Okay, I think it worked.
Perfect.
And then it just has a box that is still open here. There's like an option that says broadcast message to all and then close all rooms. Should I just keep that open until you're ready to close them?
Yes.
Okay, I will do that.
Well, actually, oh, and now I can see them.
Oh, okay.
That's weird. I think it's because that you didn't add me to one. So I'm going to kind of like go around and ask folks to.
Yeah, perfect. And like I said, let me know if you need me to broadcast a message and when it's time to like close the rooms too.
Okay, I can do that.
Hi, Chelsea. Are you just joining this breakout session?
No, I got kicked out or I don't know what happened. So
Really?
I'm coming back in and now in the room. So that's good.
Okay. Well, we want you to be, I think, in a breakout. Do you know which one you were in? Was it like room 1, 2, or 3?
I did not see which room.
Let me see if I can assign you.
Oh, yeah, I don't have that.
I can let you, I can say some names. Would you remember any names, or are you just kind
No,
of
I
joining?
didn't see anything. As soon as she said she was going to sign us into rooms, that's when I dropped.
All right, well, I'm gonna go ahead and keep trying this. Thanks for your patience.
No problem. Here we go.
All right, hopefully it works. And then Lisa, did you also get kicked out of the room?
No, I was not. I've had to be in another meeting. I'm just now getting to join, so I don't know if you
Oh.
want me to join or not.
Oh, I'm sure she does. I'm just hosting this for Katie. She's the main presenter here. But
Okay.
yeah, basically what they're doing is they're looking at really, really simple data, and they're just kind of talking about how they would use it and next steps and stuff like that. So I'll go ahead and I'll send you over into a room.
Okay, thank you. I
Yeah,
appreciate
no
it.
problem. Were you hoping to bounce to another room? Because I could assign you if that's easier. Oh, you're on mute.
Oh, no, it's easy. I can just hit the join button now. For some reason, it wasn't showing up before, but now it shows up right there.
Well, yeah, this is my first breakout session experience. So I've been a part of breakouts, but not seen behind the scenes. So it's,
Well, you did really good, especially on the fly. I'm sorry, I should have let you know ahead of time.
oh, you are totally fine. I think it's weird that it didn't let you do it, but it's really simple.
Yeah, it's pretty, especially when you do a random breakout.
Yeah, exactly.
And-
Not having to assign.
And it's amazing how people interact when you throw them in a small group.
Yes, exactly.
Uh, Okay, did everybody learn something from the data? All right, so let's go ahead. So what I want is to understand, like, what was the kind of process you all went through as a group to settle on a question or an analysis? What did you find, and what would your next steps or wonderings for the future be? So, do we have a group that wants to go first? All right, I'll just go in order. How about group one?
Hi, everyone. So our process was, actually, let me share it. So we began by filtering the data down to look at just adults, and then we focused on the spring 2021 and fall 2021. And so we added percentages to the column. We had a discussion around the Native Hawaiian and other Pacific Islander population being significantly low to the point that they couldn't really be included in the analysis. And then our most surprising finding was that we actually have a larger percentage of students of color, of Black and African American students who start in the spring versus the fall. And then we had we also wasn't surprising to us that we had more first-time students who are Hispanic or Latino than non-first-time students. And then on the completion rates, we saw a drop-off in completion that seemed to be timed around COVID.
Great. All right, so let's go with group two.
I'll be the spokesperson for group two. We first were looking at demographically looking at just the Hispanic population for that comparison group to the rest, given the focus that we have at our institutions on that population. And we were noticing those high rates of credential completion for the adult learners in comparison to the 24 and under group, so that was something that was of interest to us. And what we wanted for additional data would have been splitting out those completion by first time versus non-first time students. We also had some questions about time to completion for those groups, the programs that they're in, and earnings after completion.
Very cool. And then our last group.
Last but not least. So Katie, when you came in, we had just decided that we already know enough about this data. So we didn't have any more questions for this data, but we did decide, well, what we actually want to know is about the students that don't make it to us. So non-consumption of higher education. And so we started to think about what was the data available out there, and CC just got access to College app, and we've been playing around in the sandbox with that. And so what you had challenged us, what would your data request be if you want to know about non-consumption? And so we were thinking about what is the population of 25 to 64 within our service area with no post-secondary education, and the population in the same demographic with some post-secondary education, but no completion. And then break that down by zip code, and then analyze the zip code. What's the total attainment rate for that zip code? What is the income level for that zip code? And then figure out what the needs are in order to help that population make their way to campus? What are the needs to help them be successful? Can we build schedules around, the transportation that would be needed to get from their location to campus? Just, going down a whole needs assessment of what it would be to be more present within that population and help them get to campus. We have free RTD, we have a lot of services that we can provide. So we just need to know who they are.
That's great. So question for the group, where might we find that data? Does anyone have any ideas? So Christina, I think you could find that data in the census data set.
Yeah, so I didn't want to speak over anyone if anyone else had any other ideas, but yes, there's census data, there's Department of Labor data, there's, College App is really cool because it provides you with voter data that they've already analyzed, and they've paired it up with consumer information that they've been able to pull from credit card reports and et cetera. So very interesting data that you can get from College App. And we have already started to play around with it a little bit for the Finish What You Started grant, COSI grant funding. So we're just going to keep digging until we can figure out where we can best put our efforts.
Right. Peter, you had some data too that you could find other data sets with. Can you talk a little bit about where you might find those data that you mentioned, things like time to degree and or wages after graduation?
So time to degree would be one that we would get through our IR data request. And then wages after completion, that is something that our department program chairs are reporting, are looking at, but we could also be looking at UI data, other kinds of Department of Labor data to get a sense if we could cross-reference that back to our students,
Right.
get a sense of at least industry and wages that they are reporting, as long as they are working in industries that are, W-2 employees, right, rather than contractors.
Right. Right. So hopefully this helped you all to think about some of the ways that you might start with a simple data set, move to some additional questions, and consider the other data sets that are available, because there is really a wealth, and it's a growing wealth of data that's out there. I know the community college system recently got access to the Department of Labor data, and each year the Department of Higher Education puts out a return on investment report that also has wage data by program for each of your colleges. And so starting with those data sets that are already available is a really great way to start the inquiry. Oftentimes we get stopped by some of our critical questions can't be answered, and so then we stop. And so what I would challenge all of you to do is think about what are the things that can be answered, and how do we use that to help continue to move the conversation forward, especially when it comes from adult students, because we largely have not had a lot of data on adult students, not because it's not out there, but because it's not the kind of thing we are used to reporting a lot of times. So we oftentimes look at four-year graduation rates using the graduation rate survey. 5 years ago, IPEDS created an outcomes measure survey that actually does capture what happens to non-first-time students. I've yet to see a big national report on the outcomes measures. And I know that oftentimes when I talk to campuses, they don't know the outcomes measures is there. And so just know that there is a series of data that's behind the scenes that you can connect with each other, and probably people in other departments know about it. So just kind of really want to challenge everyone to continue to use the data that's out there to create a cascading process of use, so that you can continue to make this work. And thanks everyone for joining me. Hopefully it was helpful to get to dig into some data together today, and have a good rest of your summit.
Thank you, Katie.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
I just put a little direct question in the chat for you.
Yes, they do.
How does one come to have access to that?
I have some ideas for you
Okay, thank you.
to chat about.
Thank you. I need to reach back out to you. I'm sorry. I'll get on
No,
that.
you're all good. You're totally good. You guys have been busy. It was exciting to hear about your the transcript stuff is coming along, it sounds like.
Yeah, we're working really hard on it. Did you hear that DSST just joined us in the ecosystem? I got to get an LOI addendum to them so that they're part of it, but it is pretty awesome to get that ecosystem running. We're just doing a lot of research right now.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, hoping DPS will follow.
So DPS is not in it.
Not yet.
Is Advanced ADU a partner?
Well,
I mean, I know that they're a competitor, but
well, I know. I don't know. We haven't really. We'll have to talk some more about it. But
yeah,
it's been a lot of fun getting everybody to agree on campus, at least, to participate. And then we've been talking with a few local employers to just kind of start putting a plug in
cool.
here. So that's been pretty exciting too. But yeah, right now we're just in research mode.
Cool. Very fun.
Yeah, actively recruiting. But I'll reply to your email because we do need to get together.
Okay, that sounds good.
Thank you.
Good to see you, Christina.
Good to see you too.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to our next round of data, digging into the data. And I will give the same warning this time that I gave our last group, because essentially what we are going to do, we're really going to get our hands dirty. I'm going to encourage you to look at a data set and do some analysis. And the purpose of this session is to just kind of inspire us for how we might use data going forward to inform our work with adult students. Give folks a couple minutes to join. I know that they're coming from other places. And I just put a Padlet into the chat. I'm not going to use PowerPoint, so this Padlet kind of takes us on a tour of some of the topics we're going to cover. So we'll do introductions. We will talk a little bit about critical questions and how important they are to the work that we do when we are looking at data. And then we are going to go into a sandbox, play with some data, come back and report out on what we learned. And then finally, if we have time, I'm going to invite everybody to share their favorite data resources that relate to adult students. So as everybody comes in, I would like to request, we have a big group, so I don't feel like we can do introductions individually, but I do want to know who each person is. And a little bit about what your biggest data challenges are. And I would, and then I'll ask some of you to share some of those big data challenges to the group. So to introduce yourself in our chat, please add your name, your position, including which school you're from, and then your biggest barrier to using data. And while you are doing that, I will take a couple minutes to introduce myself. So my name is Katie Zaback, and I am a consultant with Zaback Solutions. And I'm here to present to you today because I've been part of the REACH initiative, helping states figure out how to report data in a relatively straightforward way and consistent way that doesn't add too much burden to their plate. But also to help us think about how we utilize this data to catalyze change at the state level. And that's really what my consulting practice is based on, is how do we take the imperfect data that is out there into the space and turn it into actions that are going to happen anyway, probably, making sure that we have some level of data to help inform our action. I think a lot of what allows us to use data is getting deep in with the data. We have to interact with the data in order for us to understand how we should make decisions based off of it. I know dashboards are quite popular, and dashboards on their own don't lead to change in action, and they don't lead to change in behavior. What leads to change in action and what leads to change in behavior is people connecting with the data in those dashboards, finding their own truths and talking about it and working through the difficult conversations that you have to have when you see data that challenges what your traditional thinking was, and or what your all the messiness of data. So data cannot just be a dashboard that we look at and all come to the same conclusion. It never happens that way. It has to be a group of people who create a space where they can come together and do understand what it means and then decide how they want to act on it. And so I think that that's a really important context, and that's what I want us to kind of go through an exercise of today. So for those of you who are just joining us, because I know that we have a couple, I'm using a Padlet to kind of take us through today. And I just ask people to go ahead and in the chat, give name, position, and biggest barrier to using data. So I'm looking at some of the comments. I know last time, one of the biggest barriers that we came up with was access to data. I like this one by Tico, trying to not get lost in all the data points that impact our students. I think that's a really common challenge, is there's so much data that we can look at. That's why today we've used a very simple data set to show how much you can get out of something that you probably look at relatively often. Does anyone want to share your biggest data challenge with the whole group? Tika, you want to say a little bit more about getting lost in the data?
Yeah, sure. I'm Tika from PPSC. I think there are several points. So when we start looking at, okay, our underserved students, first generational students, Hispanic students, have you ever served in the military? Because then there's a different data set. And then if you're first generational, are you parenting? And I think it just goes on and on and on. And I got stuck on when we were looking at early alerts and all of the different parts of puzzles to early alerts. And then if you're a male of color, specifically a Black male, which might be different, your needs if you're a Hispanic male. And so I just find myself going down this rabbit hole of all these other things that have the potential to negatively impact our students. So that's kind of where my head was going with that particular comment. Does that make sense?
Makes sense to me. Can anyone else relate? Give me a thumbs up or a hand sign if you've been in the depths of the data so much you can't get yourself out. Who else has something that they might want to share?
I've had, I'm Sylvia Garcia from Pikes Peak Community College. I'm Director of Career Services, and I've had those moments like, okay, here's the data. Now what? it's interacting with that data to do something effective, or at least start thinking about, accepting it. This is what is, now what?
Right. That transform into action is really tough, right? Because you've seen it, but have the people around you seen it? And what does that translation process look like? Yeah.
And I would also add, when you start finding those points that are significant, do you have the resources to actually implement, right, the interventions that will be necessary? Because otherwise we're constantly looking at data, we're coming up with some of these things we know, first generational students, all of these other things that I think we already know sometimes, but may need a little more time spent on resource allocation and actually implementing interventions, and then reassessing to see if our data actually show any type of changes.
Right. I see in the chat that Dr. Menzies had a similar sentiment around too little time, so much data, not knowing what to focus on. Anyone else want to share data before we jump into a little brainstorm about critical questions? All right, so one of the secret magic tricks of doing data is to define your critical questions. If you just look at a set of data and start jumping into it, you will go into a black hole. And so I find I have a hard, fast rule that nowadays, anytime I am going to analyze a data set, I come in with a set of critical questions. And the critical questions do not mean that I can't go beyond that, but they do mean that I need to have an initial starting point within my data set. So as you think about adult learners, I would love for you to spend some time brainstorming those critical questions that you have about adult learners. And I'm going to share another Padlet that will allow you to interact. I'll actually pull it up on the screen. And you'll see that the last group put in some critical questions. So you can peruse theirs and vote them up if you like them, or make comments if you have insights. And you can also add your own. So here is our Padlet. I am going to go ahead and share my screen. We'll spend about 5 minutes brainstorming our critical questions. And this is a data sharing exercise too. So if you have insights for people, or a source for a question that somebody has, feel free to contribute. I'm going to send this out to everybody who was part of the conversation so that you capture the collective learning. And just a quick little walkthrough, because I know that sometimes it can be confusing. The plus signs here is how you add a comment. So I can just add a plus sign, type whatever I want to type. You can share a link if I want to. Sometimes these get crazy and people start sharing graphics. And then you can also vote something up or down if it's something that you really like or really disagree with. if you've entered your critical questions, consider kind of looking through them. And part of being a good data analyst is grouping things into patterns. So what are the kinds of themes that you see in your critical questions? And I'm going to ask you all to kind of share those. So does anyone see any themes in our critical questions that you might want to share? One of the things I see that I think is really relevant when we think about data is that some of these things are about student perceptions. While some of them are about population, or questions around the population. So for example, a question around the population might be the question around educational attainment and what's the demographic breakdown based on educational attainment rate. And a perception question might be what kind of careers are adult learners most interested in? So those kinds of questions, I think it's important to note, require different kinds of approaches to data. So population questions are largely available from lots of different data sets, versus the student perception questions are oftentimes going to require some kind of either some kind of survey or some kind of a survey of somebody, a survey of students, a survey of people who are serving the students, observation, those kinds of things. And that is a much different question around how to use data and the kind of analysis that you use for data than your questions around what's happening with the population. Those kinds of things the population questions can often be answered by data that is either in a federal data set or data that's being collected by an institution as part of their everyday processing. And so thinking about the data in those two ways, I think, could be a helpful distinction. Did anyone else see any trends in our critical questions that is pertinent to data that they wanted to point out? Okay. You guys are going to have to interact because we are jumping into the very interactive portion of our meeting, which is to jump into some work groups and actually spend some time working together to analyze some data and to look at some data and to report out on what we learned from that process. So I have created, now let me just make sure you guys can see this. You should still be able to see it. So I've created 3 different data sets, and the data sets are, some of them look slightly different than others. Some of them have some calculations in them, some of them do not, but they're generally the same basic information. So they include enrollment. This is new enrollment data. These are new enrollees at the community college system. And it includes It includes enrollment status for our enrollees, race, ethnicity, age, and then the counts of the students who enrolled in the fall and the spring, and then the number of students who completed in the fall and the spring. Now, we don't have first time or transfer status for the students who completed, but we do have which a level of report they completed at. So it's essentially two different data sets. You could look at both, you could look at one. My challenge to you is to do some kind of analysis that you as a collective deem meaningful for your work on adult students. So that might be, you might do a population profile. You might profile, what do your Latino students look like? What do your Latino adult students look like? You might compare, how do two groups compare to one another? You might say, I've looked at this data enough, I don't care about this data, but I want to know this. And you might construct your own data request as a team to figure out what you want to ask more about. And so that's the basic task at hand. We will split into 3 groups and spend about 15 to 20 minutes just kind of workshopping the data and connecting with each other to figure out, you know, the goal of this is for you all to come out with your wheels turning so that you can go back within your own context and say, you know, I want to answer this political question. I'm going to look at the data this way, and I'm going to have these next steps. So that's kind of the goal of this exercise, is to get you in the messiness of the data so that you go back to your own context, thinking about what additional questions you might want to answer going forward. So I'm going to stop share, and I know that Lauren is going to put us into, Lauren, I'm wondering if we want to do 2 groups this time.
Okay, yeah, I'll go ahead and do 2.
And I'll come visit. And then, oh, wait, I need to give you guys access to that file. Sorry, folks.
Do you recommend us working with people from our college so that we're looking at something?
I recommend you working with your small group, with this small group, and then letting this small group kind of work through the questions, because you'll learn from this small group. It's like an exercise of playing in the sandbox. How do you work with the small group to answer a data question and to kind of come up with some outcomes? So I'll ask you to identify somebody who's going to report out on what you found and kind of what the process was like. And the drive is in there so that you can see that. Or so that you can access the file. And I would recommend go ahead and use, team 1 should use data file 2 in that drive, and team 2 should use data file 3 in that drive.
All right, I've got 2 rooms, and I'll go ahead and open them right now.
Oh, welcome back. Do we have, so you got a chance to work with the data. One of the things I noticed in each of our groups is that different individuals brought different strengths into those conversations. So I'm curious to hear what you did, what your conversation was like, and kind of what your key takeaways were.
I can go ahead for group 1, and Susie, you're here too, so please feel free to add or edit anything I say. I think, one of the things we noticed about our data sets was that it led us to more questions that may or may not be able to be addressed by data, or, that kind of data, right? So,
yeah,
because we kept flipping back and forth and looking at the critical questions and thought, okay, things like, what are preventing these people from engaging at the institution? Not necessarily going to be addressed by that, but it could help us do something like build a survey. looking for things like that, critical questions, and then, go on to perhaps create something else, because we started to see trends. In one of the things you mentioned, Katie, was, we were looking among Hispanic and Latinos, and we said, does one of these groups seem disproportionately more successful or more likely to enroll or something like that? And the answer was yes. And then we say, why? Okay. So, that definitely pushes us farther in that direction. So that's kind of what we came up with.
Yeah, I think that the quantitative data can only get you so far. It oftentimes has to be paired with the qualitative. What about our other group? There was I thought some good discussion in the second group as well.
Okay, I'll start. Well, we had several different, we started a conversation that built upon, and we started actually, Gary, where you started with, hey, I'm looking at this now, I have 5 more questions and I haven't even read what I needed to answer the original question that I came in here with. And then we had this conversation about what's applicable, what's practical. And Corey and I, we were looking at different minds. It was much more complicated than it needed to be. But how would we start looking at the data? Mine was just separating by age, ethnicity, whatever, and looking at it and highlighting, where Corey brought to our attention how you can use these very simple graphs, the pivot tables, to kind of see what's going on in a snapshot. And then the last thing that we ended up talking about was sometimes there's a disconnect between us assuming the knowledge that people should have around analyzing data versus the knowledge that sometimes they have. And then how can you close that gap by working together with the same, premise, right? Which is, how do our students succeed? And they succeed the more that all of us are well-versed in what we're trying to do to make sure that we can be intentional. I think I covered it all. Corey, did you want to add?
You did a great job. Thanks.
Great. Well, so we are almost at our time, but I mean, I think the thing I want you all to take away is how valuable a process of kind of working through the mess with one another can be, how much you can learn from having different groups at the table who have different skill sets that they can bring to it, and how you don't need the perfect data to start doing the work. You can start with, these reach data sets were created by the system for all of the institutions, that they should be easily accessible data for your institution. And jumping off from a data set like this, you can start to answer a lot of questions. And that sets you in a path where you can start to identify and think through solutions. So hopefully this has been helpful. I appreciate everybody joining. It's fun to see the folks from so many different perspectives at our campuses, and continue to do your good work to engage our adult students and to continue to serve them and to let data be a driver for that work.
Hey, Katie, I have one more question before you go.
Of course.
Is there a process that you're using or that you would recommend for us to try to think about as we even think about the questions that we want to ask, right? So I know some of the stuff in my head that may not be the question that gets me the data that I'm seeking for. And I say that sometimes I think I ask for data, repetitive data, because I'm not quite sure of my question, if that makes sense.
So one of my encouragements, and this is an interesting group because we've got some IR directors here, is that IR, your data professional should be at the table when you're constructing and thinking through the questions that you want to ask. And if you are an IR professional, you should feel empowered to push back on the questions people ask you, especially when oftentimes they will come to you with questions that don't really make sense from a data perspective. So it really has to be a two-way conversation is the most important, because what the IR person needs to do is really ask good questions to understand what you want to know, And what you need to be able to do is explain what you want to know, not what they need to, not try to give them a bunch of specifications around what is needed. So I think that that's what's most important, is that you have a two-way conversation. So the more often you can include a data advisory committee meeting, or you can understand what the processes are for your data teams, so that you can really truly engage with them, I think is really important.
Hey, Katie, Joe Southcott at PPCC.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't agree more. Being a math guy, a statistician myself, the mistake we sometimes make is thinking we know the data we want to answer the question we have. We ask IR for the data, it comes to us, and then we say, well, that doesn't help me. And so having the expert who understands how to pull the data, how to present the data, will help the person who's trying to ask the right questions answer the question that needs to be asked. And that is such an important, it wastes so much time when we don't include IR in the investigative process.
Yeah.
Great. I just will add to that, Joe, the fact that I think as we move forward, there has to be a level of mutual respect, right? Where the person coming to you may not know it, but they're trying to come to you, and we don't want them to feel like we're not available to do that because we don't know the question sometimes, and then vice versa, i.e. they're the subject matter expert, but what we need is the subject matter expert in data, but we also need the academic interpretation. Right. Which also comes from faculty as well. So anyway, so that's my mission. I told our IR person, if you could teach me, it will be a testament that you can teach anybody. Right. So anyway.
Yeah. You know, and
you'll probably teach her a lot too.
Yeah. And the other one is there is standard data that should be pushed all the time, right? I mean, that everybody agrees on, that's just good information to know. But when you're trying to figure out how to move whatever forward, it helps that everybody gets in the room together to figure it out before you actually start pulling the data.
Right. Well, everybody, it was so great to have you. Thanks again. Thank you. Good luck with your work.
Thank you. You have a good one.
Thank you.